Now we're going to run through the product demo video here. As I said, short 5-minute video that will just show you what this interface looks like, how easy it is to run a pen test with Cysys and get actionable insights based on what it finds. Now the first thing that we do when setting up a Cysys run is decide what type of test we want to run. The default mode is what's called a black box test. So that is essentially a test that will operate in the same way as an attacker with no prior information given to that attacker. They make their way onto the network, but then they have to work out who's who, what's what, and where they can go. We'll run the demo in that particular mode, but the other types of tests that you can do, you can run a targeted test. So that will be testing specific elements in your network. So you might just want to test the performance of your antivirus by trying to inject payloads. That's fine. You can do a specific test with that. You might want to just test your password policy and the strength of it. You can test that specific element. You also have what if scenarios, which are kind of, but they're called grey box scenarios, but it will be what would happen if this particular user were to click on a phishing link, for example, or what would happen if this particular host was injected with malware or ransomware. You can test really specific scenarios to see what the impact would be, perhaps if someone who should have low privileged rights clicks on an email that they shouldn't. Does that then mean that that attacker can escalate their way through the network and get their hands on your most critical files or assets? You can also run this tool in just a normal vulnerability assessment mode, which will look for any outdated hosts or any hosts that have known vulnerabilities in them, things like WannaCry and Eternal Blue. If you wanted to just hunt for that specific vulnerability, you can do that as well. Now in this mode, we're going to run it in black box. So as if an attacker has just got onto the network for the first time and has to work out everything for themselves. You define how you want the attack to look. So give this particular template a name and tell it a particular IP range that you want it to go after. That could be your entire network, that could be a subset or a department. It's completely up to you. Anything you want to exclude from the range, if you've got third-party assets on site that don't belong to you as the organization, you don't want to test them. How long you want the test to last for in terms of days or hours, and how noisy or stealthy you want this machine to be. Do you want it to act like a script kiddie, looking to just gather information and alert, not worry about alerting your security tools, or do you want it to be stealthy and act like a nation state attacker, someone who knows what they're doing? You can choose whether you need it to ask for your approval before carrying out some of the more aggressive exploits. We'll see that functionality here in the demo. That's kind of, if you're running this for the first time and you were concerned about any of the exploits that you're running, you could run it in approvals mode. Usually once customers are happy with the tool, they run it fully automated, knowing that it's not going to cause any harm or detriment. That's there as an extra safety feature. You can then schedule how frequently you want this particular test to be run, on what day, on what week, on what time, who you want the report to go to at the end, and then you press play. So this is the main interface that you'll see, and it will tell you in the middle what it's doing at every point. We start by sniffing the network, running services enumeration to work out what these hosts are and what they're doing, what's Windows, what's Mac, what's Linux, what version of each. Is it a workstation, is it a server, and is it vulnerable to anything? Now, as we find vulnerabilities and look to exploit them, we start getting attacker achievements on the left-hand side as the box manages to carry out specific actions. So already here, we skipped to 9 minutes in, it sniffed some user credentials on the network, cracked some passwords of the user that it found, validated those creds against the domain controller. And here, just inside 10 minutes, the machine actually manages to get to domain admin level. Now, if this was an attacker on this network, they would own this network within 10 minutes. If this was a penetration tester, usually they wouldn't be able to get to this point that quickly. But often they could then say, look, we found what we needed to find. We've proven a route to domain admin. This is what you need to fix. The Cysys tool won't stop there. It will keep looking for more vulnerabilities, more issues, more things that could be found in order to show you then, perhaps if there are 5 or 6 different ways to getting to domain admin, A, we uncover them all, but also B, we might be able to show you that there's one fix that will solve all of those issues for you. So even though it gets to that 10 out of 10, it won't stop. It will keep going, keep looking for more problems so that we give you a holistic view of every issue on the network and how you can resolve more of them as quickly as possible. So with that, we still have 25 approvals that are waiting to happen here in the top right corner. things that we've said to the machine, don't do this without checking with me first. If we jump in here, we can filter the types of exploits that it wants to run by either the exploit type or the IP. It will show you then, this is what I want to do, this is the host I want to do it to. You can tick whether or not you're happy. If you leave these exploits unticked, it will not run them. If you do as we do here and tick them all and say, yep, I'm happy with all of these, go and run these exploits, see what else you find, you'll then get a load more attacker achievements populate on the left-hand side as it goes and does those things that you've now allowed it to do. So we're 11 minutes in here. The Sysis machine has basically taken over this network, and if it were an attacker, could now essentially do whatever it wanted, depending on the intentions of that particular attacker. What we can do though, and this is where it gets more interesting, is click in any of these achievements on the left-hand side and get to view the attack vector. So this is a step-by-step flowchart of how this attack played out and the path that the attacker took. So if we click on the fact that we got to domain admin, we then get to see this vector here, which shows 3 different vulnerabilities which led to this achievement. Those vulnerabilities are the blue boxes along the top, and then a host of different steps that the machine took to get down to that domain admin phase. Now, if we take the first vulnerability here, that 5.5, the blue box that we see at the top, the problem there was that sensitive information could be sniffed on the network. There was a protocol that enabled the machine to sniff user credentials and traffic on that network. Once it sniffed them, the next problem was that multiple authentication attempts were made without being blocked. So that's the 6.0 vulnerability here. Because those authentication attempts were not blocked, the password of that user was then cracked, which is the 8.2 vulnerability. Having cracked that password, the machine validated those credentials against the domain controller and worked out that actually those credentials that I've managed to crack are that of a domain admin user. I now have domain admin access rights on this network, and essentially, as I said, could do what I want. Now, what's interesting here is that these 3 vulnerabilities are not to do with anything being unpatched or outdated. They are dynamic issues. So they're things, protocols and processes that aren't put in place that are essentially best practice. So some of you may have vulnerability management tools or vulnerability scanning tools on your networks. Those tools will not find these problems. You could have a patch perfect environment that's completely up to date. These issues can still be prevalent on that network. Now, what we can do is click into any of the boxes and get an insight as to, okay, what does this particular issue mean? If we click on the fact that sensitive information can be sniffed, essentially where the attack started, we get some insight on the right-hand side here in terms of what the protocol was that enabled the sniffing and what the recommended remediation is, in which case, in this case, it's that we turn off the protocol that enabled that traffic to be sniffed. What we can do is say, okay, we understand roughly what we need to do now, what the problem is. What would the impacts be if we fix this issue? If you click this simulate fix button here, everything now grayed out is impossible for an attacker to do if we fix this problem. So we can visualize this and say, okay, great, if I fix one problem here, I solve this entire attack vector and I neutralize everything here and I stop this from being possible. What we can then show you is exactly how to go about fixing that problem. So we understand what the impact of that fix will be. If we click down the bottom on the detailed remediation advice link, this will take you to a wiki that's stored on the device that will give you a real simple breakdown of this is what the problem is. And if you follow these steps and procedures, you'll eliminate this problem from your environment. So not just showing you where the issues are, but showing you how to fix those issues to ensure that they are swiftly eliminated from your network in a very simple to follow step-by-step process. What the tool then goes on to do and show is that it will take information that it finds and not just report back on that and say, here's a problem, but do what an attacker would do. In essence, take information and see where else I can use that information. Perhaps I gather someone's login credentials, someone's username and password. It's then going to look to use that information to try and log into other devices to see how it can further an attack in exactly the same way that a malicious actor would do. All of these reports, these vectors can be added to your report at the end. So these visualizations of the path that was taken can all be added to your report, and that's fully customizable. If we move on to the reports, you see here, we will run through every vulnerability that was found and grade it according to severity, the things that need to be fixed first and foremost. Every host that was picked up and which problems are within each host. Are any of them running software services that they shouldn't? Is there any shadow IT? Are there any vulnerabilities within these hosts that need to be dealt with? We'll run you through a full action report. Now this one's interesting because it will show you every single thing the machine attempted to do with a timestamp of when it tried it and where. But most importantly, on the right hand side, a breakdown of whether the action that it looked to carry out was successful or not. So this is about showing, as I said, the good as well as the bad. If, for example, the CySys machine tried to inject a load of files to your devices and your antivirus blocked every single one, we know your antivirus is good, it's configured properly, it's doing what it should be doing. You don't need to invest any time, money, or resource in fixing that because it's working. So that's great. If, on the other hand, 70% of your passwords were cracked, we can point to the fact that actually some time needs to be spent in educating your users on what a good password is, looking at your password policy and whether it's up to scratch, and show you that actually that's an area you need to focus on. So we can ensure that time isn't wasted on investing in tools and processes that are actually doing their job, and show you where needs to be focused on to become more secure. The tool will then run you through the footprints that it took from the MITRE framework, which techniques were prevalent, and a summary report that will go through everything from a very high level. So how are you performing as an organization? What kind of score are you getting? How does that compare to the last time that you ran CySys? And are you improving and heading in the right direction? How many actions were taken, of which how many were successful? What's your biggest problem area in terms of, is it that you've got too many high privileged users, weak passwords, easy to access data, an ability for attackers to move laterally with ease? We'll show you all of that and grade it for you. It will show you all of the vulnerabilities that were found, graded according to severity, all of the attacker achievements that were carried out, again, graded according to severity, with links to the remediation wiki to show you how to go and fix those particular problems. A breakdown of all the devices discovered, your password strength, how that performed. Now we've got sample reports of these. I'm conscious that it's going very fast here. So if anyone does want to see a sample version of these reports, then please do get in touch and we'll happily share that. But as I said, it's all customizable and it will essentially give you everything that was found graded according to what needs fixing first and foremost. So that's everything for the product demonstration video. We have a couple more slides left to look briefly at